Some people don't lose friends because they're toxic. They lose friends because they see too much. They see through people, through the noise, through themselves, and nothing feels real anymore. You start to know yourself. At first, it's powerful. You feel clearer, sharper. Your emotions begin to make sense. Patterns emerge. Your past stops owning you. But then, something shifts. You laugh less during small talk. You hear the gap between words and intentions. You stop relating to the people you used to die for. Their dramas sound shallow. Their joy feels synthetic. Their pain seems performative. And you smile, but deep down, you're already pulling away. This is the paradox no one warned you about. The more self-aware you become, the harder it is to feel seen. Because most people aren't speaking from truth, they're speaking from habit. You start turning down invitations. You say you're tired, you're busy, you need time. But what you're really doing is grieving the death of who you were and the social world that came with it. Not because you're better than anyone, but because you've outgrown what used to hold you. Now you're stuck in a strange, invisible place. Not lonely, just disconnected. Not depressed, just too aware. People call you distant, but you've just learned to sit with thoughts they've never dared to have. This video is not about how to fix that. It's about why it happens, and why the most conscious people often end up quietly vanishing from the lives of those who never truly knew them. Let's go there. No animal goes mad from knowing itself. Only humans do. And the deeper the knowledge, the sharper the fracture. There's a violence in self-awareness that no one talks about. Not dramatic, not cinematic, but slow, cerebral, and quiet. The kind that makes silence louder. The kind that splits you from who you used to be and then isolates you from those who never changed. The moment you see yourself, truly, a part of you dies. The autopilot, the illusion, the false comforts. You begin to grieve, not just your past, but the entire version of you that once belonged effortlessly in rooms that now feel foreign. Arthur Schopenhauer wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. And if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom. For it is only when he is alone that he is really free." But what Schopenhauer didn't finish saying, or maybe didn't dare, is that solitude doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like exile. The truth is, awareness detaches. You can't unsee, you can't go back. And suddenly the world you once lived in becomes a museum of behaviors, habits, and emotions you no longer participate in. Only observe. People speak, and you don't just hear them. You analyze them. You notice the insecurity behind the joke, the fear behind the arrogance, the loneliness behind the rage. This isn't a choice. It's a curse of clarity. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." But what happens when your why becomes unbearable? What if the very reason you live, to be honest, to be conscious, becomes the reason you're slowly fading from those around you? You start noticing how performative the world is. How much of life is just repetition in disguise. Routines paraded as purpose, laughter as defense, ambition as anesthesia. And then you ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it worth losing your place in the world, just to understand yourself more clearly? The ancient Greeks carved "Know thyself" into the temple of Apollo, as if it were a gift, but they left out the cost. They forgot to warn us that the price of knowing yourself is often knowing too much. Too much to laugh with the crowd, too much to play the game, too much to be understood, even by those who love you. So now you sit in the middle of your life, surrounded yet alone, known yet unseen. And the only thing louder than your thoughts is the quiet between you and everyone else. Because clarity doesn't connect, it divides. Overthinking isn't a flaw. It's a feature of a brain that refuses to lie to itself. And the people who feel too much or think too much, they're not broken. They're just running a level of consciousness this world isn't built for. There's something terrifying about a mind that won't shut up. Not in a dramatic movie-style breakdown, but in the real way. The way your brain won't let go of a conversation from 3 days ago. The way you dissect every social interaction for hidden motives. The way silence isn't peaceful anymore. It's a chalkboard of intrusive thought. People call it anxiety, or high-functioning sensitivity, or rumination. But what it really is depth with no off switch. And it isolates you, not because you want distance, but because you need relief. Relief from the constant awareness. Relief from carrying every layer of every moment all at once. Neuroscience shows us that self-awareness is connected to hyperactivity in the default mode network, the part of the brain responsible for introspection, memory, and simulation of self. It's what allows us to reflect, but it's also what traps us in analysis, loops, predictions, replays. A 2010 Harvard study revealed something brutal. A wandering mind is an unhappy mind. And guess whose minds wander most? Those who self-reflect. Those who pause before speaking. Those who notice patterns. Ask why too much and stare at the ceiling at 2:47 a.m., wondering if they said the wrong thing 8 years ago. When your mind is wired to track everything, reality becomes overwhelming. Not just emotionally, but cognitively. You exhaust your social battery not because people are bad, but because your brain treats every moment like it's a chess match, not a coffee break. You don't burn out, you overload. In evolutionary terms, introspection is rare. Most species survive without ever thinking about thinking. Humans are the anomaly. And even among humans, some people live just fine, without ever questioning their identity, their culture, or their childhood wounds. But if you're wired for deep cognition, you can't help but look inward, even when it hurts, even when it isolates you. That's the cruelty. The more advanced the mind, the more alone it tends to be. Psychologist Elaine Aron's research on highly sensitive persons, HSPs, uncovered that 15 to 20% of people process stimuli more deeply. They reflect more, react more, feel more, and as a result, they retreat more, not to escape, but to survive. Because the world isn't built for nervous systems that absorb everything. You notice the micro-expression that contradicted the smile. You hear the insecurity buried under praise. You walk into a room and feel the emotional residue before anyone speaks. So you withdraw. Not because you don't love people, but because being around them hurts in ways they'll never understand. And in time, the solitude you used to fear becomes the only space where your nervous system isn't at war. This is how introspection quietly becomes isolation. Not because you've changed, but because your brain evolved to live in a depth most people never enter. And that depth, over time, becomes a form of exile. A silent, mental country where very few people speak your language. Connection doesn't die in arguments. It dies in silence. When you realize the words you need don't exist in the other person's world. There comes a point in awareness where words start failing. Not because you're speechless, but because translation becomes impossible. You try to explain what you're feeling, but it comes out fragmented, diluted, and you watch the other person nod politely, completely unaware that what you just said wasn't a sentence. It was a scream. This is where the isolation becomes surgical. You still love people. You still need them. But now you're split by an invisible barrier. Cognitive dissonance between realities. What used to be friendship becomes performance. What used to be shared laughter becomes tolerated noise. What used to be closeness becomes emotional charades. You're too intense. You read into everything. You think too much. No, you just feel deeper than their language can carry. Zygmunt Bauman, in his work Liquid Modernity, wrote, "The more individuals are thrown upon their own resources, the less they can count on durable ties. In a hyper-individualistic culture, where identity is curated and connection is fast food, people who think slowly, feel deeply, or live authentically often become strangers in their own social circles. You try to slow down a conversation and they speed it up. You try to open a deeper topic and they flinch. You talk about fear, meaning, loss, and their faces fog like you're speaking a foreign dialect. And you are. Because emotional fluency isn't universal. Most people were never taught to sit with discomfort, to speak from their inner world, or to accept truths that don't come wrapped in convenience. So you shrink. You censor your depth. You stop trying to explain the sadness behind your eyes, or the exhaustion behind your detachment. Sociologist Émile Durkheim called this state anomie, a condition of normlessness, where old structures collapse and new ones fail to replace them. And when you become too aware of your internal world, society stops making sense. Small talk becomes unbearable. Chasing trends feels grotesque. Groupthink sounds like static. You're not antisocial. You're just no longer compatible with the operating system of surface-level life. So you stay quiet. You become fluent in things no one around you speaks. And slowly, you forget how to translate yourself. They sold you healing like it was skincare, as if all your existential weight could be solved with a journal, a morning routine, and a podcast playlist. But what if the more you worked on yourself, the less you belonged anywhere? Self-knowledge used to be sacred. It was philosophy, prayer, solitude. It meant wrestling with demons, walking through fire, tearing off masks you didn't know you wore. Now, it's merch. The modern world didn't just co-opt introspection, it commodified it. You're not learning to understand yourself. You're learning how to optimize yourself for systems that were never built for your well-being. You meditate not to confront your inner chaos, but to be more productive at work. You do shadow work, not to liberate your soul, but to post a quote on Instagram. You heal not to reconnect with others, but to convince yourself that you don't need anyone. It's not self-awareness, it's self-marketing. What was once a terrifying internal journey has been repackaged into something clean, digestible, and profitable. You're told to know yourself, but never to question the world that made you sick in the first place. Because real self-knowledge is messy. It destabilizes you, it makes you cry in public, it kills your illusions, especially the ones that made you likable. But that's not sellable. What's sellable is control. And that's what most people are chasing when they say they're on a healing journey. Control over pain, control over image, control over unpredictability. Michel Foucault, in his study of power and selfhood, argued, "The care of the self is not about discovering who you are. It's about constructing who you are willing to become within the constraints of power." And that's what we've done. We've turned self-knowledge into a performance, a curated version of inner work that doesn't actually change you, it just edits you. So people go deeper and deeper into themselves, not to reconnect with the world, but to escape it. They say they're becoming authentic, but really, they're just becoming less interruptible. They cut off friends for being low vibe. They leave relationships that challenge them, calling it boundaries. They avoid discomfort, critique, or contradiction, calling it protecting my peace. But what if your peace is just a prettier prison? What if your constant journey into yourself has made you allergic to connection, allergic to complexity, allergic to being human? This is the trap. You go so deep into yourself that you no longer have any bridges left to walk back into the world. And the cruel part? They'll applaud you for it. They'll call you evolved, high frequency, next level. But you're not next level. You're just isolated. and no one can save you from a prison you've mistaken for freedom. Some people come back to the world, not because they're healed, but because they're tired of being untouched. Solitude teaches you things connection never could, but it also takes something from you, something quiet, something human. And eventually, even the most self-aware person begins to hunger for a different kind of truth, the kind that lives between people, the kind you can't reach alone. You don't forget the pain that pushed you inward. You don't unlearn the lies you uncovered, but you start to understand something deeper. Not everything true has to be said. Not everything real has to be explained. Some things, the best things, have to be felt with. The world will never speak your inner language fluently. But that doesn't mean you stop speaking. It means you learn to translate with grace, not to dilute yourself, but to build bridges between states of consciousness. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." But he also knew something more dangerous, that those who become too familiar with darkness can forget how to feel sunlight on their skin. You must go inward, but you must also come back. Not because the world is ready for you, but because some part of you still wants to be with it, even in the imperfection. You can keep your depth, you can keep your discernment, but if you let your clarity turn into contempt, you'll lose the one thing your consciousness was trying to protect all along, your capacity to belong. Even Viktor Frankl, a man who survived the unspeakable, warned us against inner freedom becoming isolation. He said, "Love is the ultimate and the highest goal to which man can aspire. Not knowledge, not insight. Love, not as romance, not as fantasy, but as the radical act of staying reachable, even when you know better, even when it hurts." So maybe this is the hidden ending of self-awareness. Not escape, not detachment, but a quiet return to life. Altered, yes, but still willing. Willing to sit with people who don't get it. Willing to be misunderstood without resentment. Willing to speak in simpler words, not because you've regressed, but because you're no longer trying to win. You're just trying to meet. And in that effort, imperfect, clumsy, often unnoticed, you finally feel seen. Not because the world has changed, but because you have made peace with being whole in a world that only knows fragments. And somehow, that's enough. If you've made it this far, it means this spoke to something real in you. Maybe it put words to a feeling you've carried in silence. Maybe it reminded you that you're not strange, you're not broken. You're just aware in a world that often asks us to stay asleep. And if you feel alone in that awareness, you're not. This space, this channel, exists for people like you. People who think too much, feel too deeply, and keep showing up anyway. If this video gave you something, a moment of clarity, relief, resonance, there are a few powerful ways you can give something back. Becoming a channel member is one of them. You'll get exclusive content, early access, behind-the-scenes insights, and more than that, you'll be helping this kind of content survive in a world that favors speed over substance. It's not just support, it's belonging. A quiet signal that says, "I see you too." You can also tap the Super Thanks button below. It's a simple act, but it carries weight. It tells the algorithm, and me, that this work matters. But truthfully, just being here, just watching, just sharing this video with someone who needs it, you're already keeping this alive. And for that, sincerely, thank you. Your presence here is not background noise. It's everything.